Thanks as always to the Bangalore Film Forum and the Museum of Art and Photography, and especially thanks today for bringing over Madhuja Mukherjee, who's come from Calcutta, to be able to talk to us today. More about Madhuja and more about her extraordinary work, both as a film scholar and as a filmmaker later. Just wanted to say two or three things. One is that this particular program is entirely a collaboration with the National Film Archive of India, and we're very pleased to be able to present you with new remastered prints of their films. Now, this has had an interesting byproduct, an interesting result, which is that on more than one occasion, like last time, we are getting director's cuts. We are actually getting versions of the film that may not have been the ones that have been circulating. And this has led to very interesting historical, shall we say, revisionism of what these films were, why they were important, and what you might have to say about them today. And this is a big deal for me personally, and I think it's a big deal for all of us, because what's happening, it seems to me, is that when we are seeing these films, we're almost as though seeing them for the first time, because they are revealing today certain kinds of questions, certain kinds of knowledges, certain kinds of data that somehow was not available to us in all these years that we were watching them. Why, I don't know. It's worth talking about why it is that you're seeing, why they're making another kind of meaning in today's time. This is happening again and again. This is the fifth film in our series, and I'm very delighted to tell you that, okay, I'll just quickly tell you what we've shown so far. We started with Mrinal Sen's interview. Then we followed it up with Aravindan's Uttarayanam. Then we followed it 27 down, Avatar Calls, and then we showed Aravindan's Uttarayanam. And then last month we showed Gautam Ghosh's first film in Telugu called Ma Bhumi. And what was very weird for me was that across all of these films, we had four protagonists who turned political in very unusual ways. I mean, for example, in 27 Down, the hero is actually somebody who's utterly incapable of any kind of social relationships. He sort of curls up inside railway train compartments, and that's how he lives. Some kind of a strange protagonist of the 70s that was there. Among the issues that were discussed at that time involved, for example, things like existentialism, of great interest to writers and artists, but one wasn't aware that putting, for example, the protagonist of these four films together made a certain kind of meaning. Today, we are seeing a film which has a very different kind of protagonist. It is a story of a young executive in a British multinational who's clearly on the job track, who's on the track of basically becoming a very important figure, who's willing to compromise, who's willing to do things, petty corruption, various acts in order to get his way. But he's not a how shall we say, he's not a ruthless person. He has a family, which is going to be important. The company that he works in is called Hindustan Peters. It's a British multinational that makes fans, and there'll be lots of talk about fans today. Which may relate to Satyajit Ray's own relationship with British multinational companies, partly as his career in advertising and so on. The plot features this particular protagonist, his wife, and perhaps one of the strangest characters I've come across in the new cinema, his sister-in-law, played by none other than Sharmila Tagore. Sharmila Tagore, you should know, in 1969 had already with Aradhana and so on. I mean, I just happen to belong to the generation that grew up with the Rajesh Khanna, Sharmila Tagore films. I remember Evening in Paris, not Love in Tokyo, Evening in Paris. And I remember the kind of stature that someone like Sharmila Tagore had, along with, of course, this barely concealed sexuality. So to have her in a Ray film playing the sister-in-law is a very important bit of casting, which we are going to go into. And then you have elite life in Calcutta, in 70s Calcutta. It's a city of clubs. It is a city of high-end consumption. It is a city of fancy hotels. And you will come across Furpose, and you will come across the Tollygunge Club, and you'll come across Park Street and all those famous areas. All of this inside a city that's clearly in some kind of political ferment. Now, the film tells a relatively straightforward story about this ambitious and corruptible young man who's happy to indulge in a bit of political skullduggery to benefit the company and his own rise to the top. What is significant in this film is what's off screen, what's outside the frame, right? Whatever lies beneath the surface. So you literally have something that's off screen, that's on this side and that side of the screen, and what's underneath, as it were. What's embedded in the film. The bits and pieces of stuff that is embedded in the film, which you really look forward to catching. The objects of modern consumption, the ceiling fan, as I said, is something that will be discussed. But then there'll be the geyser in the bathroom, the tape recorder, the advertising industry, the air conditioner, all of which play a central role in this particular film, and repeatedly shown with interminable zoom shots. A very important role will be played by the telephone in this film. I mean, it's like, the zooming into the telephone wires is something you'll see. Alongside this are relationships with office colleagues, bosses, friends, and their wives, and of course the strangest relationship of all, which I think is really worth talking about, very, very Bengal, I think, between the male protagonist and his sister-in-law. Off-screen, as I said, are the radical movements of the time indicated by the previous life in Patna, I think something Madhuja is going to be talking about. The sister-in-law's boyfriend, who never appears on the screen but is some kind of a radical kind of figure, or the way that events in outside, or that the strike that takes place in the factory yield significance. So this is the film, and this is what you will see. It is the second of a trilogy of films that Ray made, preceded by Pratidwandi and followed by Jana Aranya. And you might want to see all of them together, or see this particular film as quite a separate work, which is specific what we're going to do. To discuss this film, along with me will be Madhuja Mukherjee, Professor of Film Studies at Jadavpur University, but not that alone, very much a filmmaker, visual artist, designer, and curator, author of many books and a large number of essays, which I don't want to now detail in any way. But I'm really very pleased and delighted that Madhuja has made it all the way from Calcutta to be with us this afternoon. And thanks to MAP and the Bangalore Film Forum. Enjoy the screening, and we will have this extended discussion on the film afterwards. I think, in my view, what we watched is probably Satyajit Ray's most unusual film. I mean, one has had some sense that Ray, for all his stature in Indian cinema, is often a more unusual filmmaker than we have let him be. There is a sense in which you close your eyes and think Satyajit Ray, and you still think Pathat Panchali, and you still think, there's something about this film that is truly different. And we want to dedicate this particular screening to a woman called Miss Shefali. This is, by the way, talking about fans, and we were going to be looking at fans, and Madhuja had shared this. This is a strange advertisement for Orient fans endorsed by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And I think what happened was that the Oriental fans were actually the official fan of the 1938 Indian National Congress convention. But you'll probably remember a sequence in this film which was, I think, the most extraordinary. I mean, because it really goes back to so much, which is the cabaret dancer at the back, and she is doing this snake dance or some
Hawaiian dance.
Yes,
dance. That's what she says.
And in front is this discussion of the strike, and of course you have Sharmila Tagore's face, and then this dancer at the back. This particular dancer is apparently, I came to know this only now, a lady named Miss Shefali. This is actually Satyajit Ray filming, not this film, but Pratidwandi, where she plays a nurse.
Who is into prostitution. Yeah.
This is from Furpose?
No, this is where she used to. I chose this image also because in Pratidwandi, there's a reference to the sister learning how to dance.
Yeah.
So she says that this is where I used to learn how to dance. So this is the place where she used to learn how to dance.
Right, right.
So this, and then this is in Blue Fox, where she used to do Hawaiian dance. This was special because she takes out her garland and she puts,
it on the hero. So,
yeah, so
she's doing this too.
So yeah, so she writes in a biography. So her biography has come out and it's in Bangla. There she writes that Ray was a regular visitor in one of those, mostly hotels actually, where she used to perform, but in different hotels until she went to Oberoi Grand. So here is a reference to FIPROS. In FIPROS, there is this some valet Shahib whose farewell. So that is also interesting because in her photographs there are these references to owners who were British. And that sort of speaks back to what we were discussing about Peter's fan, with so many white MDs and FDs and so on. So that is quite interesting to look at, that even that the kind of white people who had business and also that is evident in that first sequence when they go to a club and there's this large swimming pool and so on. So this is a farewell to this one of the owners of FIPROS. And this is again with another one of the owners. This is another Mr. David, again at FIPROS. Here is about her work and makeup. And this is something very interesting written, that she was 13 and her name was Aroti Dash. And I find it quite interesting that the kind of journey this figure makes in reality, because there's so much about caste in Shimabodho, of them being Chatterjee and Tutul being Bhattacharjee. Then she is, having an affair with someone who is described as Boido, which would be Sen or something like that. Still upper caste, but not, let's say, Brahmin. But then here is this woman who makes a very similar kind of journey like Tutul, in the sense that moving from the peri-urban, from the B-town to the big city, arriving for work, and then she becomes a dancer, then she learns, and then she was very big actually. And these were really sort of elite clubs and hotels where Ray was also a regular, because that act in the film of giving away her garland there's a photograph to it, and I was quite surprised that he must have picked up that act from watching. So this Aroti Dash's story itself is quite interesting in the ways it speaks to many films about how these journeys are made. And then also in Protidwandi, where she is cast as as the nurse who is into prostitution. Here she is herself. And in a biography, she writes that Ray had called me up and they wanted to know that whether they can shoot in FIPROS. And then because I was quite popular there, so I spoke to the manager, who by then was already a Kapoor. And they mentioned, in one of the dialogues that they're going to Ritz, and Ritz was also owned by Kapoor. So, and then she writes that, I'm not sure if I'm there in the film because he wanted to shoot in FIPROS, or whether he wanted to shoot me, therefore they shot in the place. So, but it's quite interesting how it's not only about an elite, and or in Shamalundu's case, he's not strictly an elite in the way Sir Borin is. He is like really unscrupulous, and he does not even have to behave well. Like Shamalundu is flirtatious, Shamalundu is sweet talking to everybody. He doesn't have to do that. He can sleep through the entire conversation. And so, so it's not about also simply about being elite and the clubs, but also a very, I think it's an important thing to bring Miss Shefali. Miss Shefali had already by then done a few films, but especially Chaurungi, which is based on, which is actually the diegetic place is Oberoi Grand. And she also performs in that film, but it is also written by Shankar. Who is, you know, whose text they adopt. Yeah. So it's really interesting to look at this kind of a space and a moment of that time that Miss Shefali was really a household name. Everybody knew about her and that's quite interesting to think of Calcutta 70s and the revolutionary moment, and to bring in Miss Shefali as a figure there. And so
I mean, it's an interesting segue into Calcutta of early 70s. You know, I mean, I remember personally, you know, there was a certain, almost a fantasy one had of Calcutta, you know. And I think it was maybe sometime later when one first visited Calcutta that you actually got a kind of a relation between the history and the mythology almost of the political agitations from roughly 1969 through to the early 70s, when Sumanto Banerjee in his famous book on the Naxalite movement talks about some 4,000 students who were killed. I mean, you know, and the official police figures. The kind of myth associated with that on the one hand, and on the other, which I was mentioning to you the other day, you know, I used to actually be an employee of the Anand Bazar Patrika. And I remember Avik Sarkar, who ran the Anand Bazar Patrika, actually speaking about how bad Calcutta's reputation was, which was exactly the opposite of how I'd known it to be. I thought it was actually the city of revolution. And he said, no, it is not the city of revolution. It is the city of clubs. You know, the most famous clubs are in Calcutta. You know, and so, you know, you get a particular idea of the imagination of it at that time. And I was wondering if you'd like to say a little bit about Calcutta in the early 1970s and how it has been constructed in the cinema. You know, I mean, as you know, Ghatak made his film, Ray made his films, Mrinal Sen made his films on Calcutta at that time. There was a lot of literature. You mentioned Shankar, Sunil Gangopadhyay, and there are others at that time. Would you say a little bit about the Calcutta of that particular period and this approach to Calcutta through, as Avik Sarkar would have it, its clubs or its race courses or, you know, Eve's Beauty Parlor or the restaurants in Park Street or whatever else it is?
So, what we were also discussing, I find it quite interesting. In fact, if we were to take all the films into consideration, including Pratidwandhi, Shimabotto, and Jono Aronno, also, let's say, Interview, Podatik, and so on. There is what we were, you know, what I thought that there is this absentee revolutionary, right? There is a revolutionary that's like a specter of revolution that's hinted that maybe Tutul's boyfriend, who is in Patna, Bihar, is a revolutionary. Maybe there is a revolutionary out there. In Jono Aronno, again, there is a conversation with the father that even here, you know, there's a conversation that there is a problem outside. And especially in that scene when in the beginning, that young chap from the factory who has just gotten the job enters and he brings in sweets and then they leave. And there's a sort of a bit of a lingering in the apartment after they leave, and you hear the bombing.
Yeah.
So it is that kind of a environment. Also, it is not clear during the party. Again, there is a sound of bombing, but it is not clear whether that's a kind of a diegetic sound or a more sort of raised comment on the situation. So there is this, or in Podatik, he is inside an apartment, and apartment becomes a big thing, as opposed to the old houses, North Calcutta, Central Calcutta, and this new apartments coming up, especially in the center Park Street area, and then Baliganj area, and that kind of new apartments, and the gadgets, and there's so much of detailing in that there's this entire tour to the house, but also sunglasses, everything, and this or the watch or the sari or the silk sari, those kinds of things. So in that sense, it's a haunting presence, which I find really interesting, and it is also and if we talk about the popular film, and that's what I've been thinking, where do we actually, in which film do we actually see the revolutionary? We actually don't. There's always really, especially in Bangla film, that there's a haunting presence that he enters, even in Kolkata Ekattor, right? And the same actor plays the revolutionary in Pratidwandi, the young brother, Debraj Rai. So it's quite interesting that it's imagined by these filmmakers, also by Sen, for that matter, Ray Sen, excepting Ghatak in Jukti Tokko, that we do not really encounter. So what are the kinds of films are we talking about? What are the kinds of question, because these are repeatedly middle-class protagonists, where they are experiencing as though a second-hand revolution. They're hearing, or they just really literally hearing the bombing, but they're not part of it. And there is a crisis of a life that was supposed to be from the 60s to take a certain kind of a flow or a rhythm that is ruptured, and there is an unease about that why is Tutul here? Is it safe to be here? Do you think is it unsafe? And that kind of conversation that is there, or the similar kinds of shot in Podatik, where he looks at the city from a certain 7th floor, and then the city does not, and from here similar kinds of dialogues, that there isn't, you don't have the mosquitoes, you don't hear the sound, and it is a safe.
Well, you don't hear the bombs, she says. You're on the 8th floor, so you're safe from that also.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the similar way, in fact, also that resonates in Podatik, that this apartment, and in interview, which I suppose was screened here, in interview he wants to get an apartment, and there is a long conversation about that with his friend, this girl who is a painter, that if they get married, he'll have an apartment and he will have a nice balcony and so on. So it is quite interesting to look at, also in literature. Again, it seems to me that this literature and the film that we are looking at, especially Sunil Ganguly, who was part of a more revolutionary group with Shakti Chattopadhyay and others, as opposed to Shankar,
Just remind us which films of Sunil Ganguly.
So the first two, Aranya Dinratri and Pratidwandi, are Sunil Gangopadhyay, and Shimabadho and Jano Aranyo are Shankar. So so it's a shift, really, I see, from that kind of a moment of revolution to a revolution that seemingly has failed, or we do not know what to do. We are bearing a guilt of the death of so many young people, and it is really that kind of a weight that I see, both in literature, in popular films, and the other is also a crisis which is with the woman, in Jano Aranyo or in Pratidwandi, that what is the sister doing, whether she is going to become a prostitute, or why is she learning to dance. Tutul, for that matter, is a kind of a moral compass, but or even Sharmila Tagore in Aranya Dinratri again plays a similar kind of role. But it is quite interesting, this grappling both in literature, in Ray Sen, but also in popular Bangla cinema of the period, that there is that we are showing, or even in Kolkata Ekattor, the third story is about that party, where they talk about that it is outside, and I would like to pose this question, that why is the revolution always outside, or we catch them at the moment when they are either failed or they are dying. We never, excepting in some shots of, let's say, rallies, there is no way that it can be immediately channelized.
On this particular idea of the revolutionary, because there's something very interesting. See, Ray is supposed to be, a person who famously used to, do a lot of archival research into his films. And, even the cigarette that someone is smoking, he will get exactly the reproduction of that cigarette, or, the sets, the et cetera, et cetera. But there are two bits of anachronism, it seems to me, in this film. One is that, as you found out, Calcutta, as a Bengal club at least, had opened itself to Indian members from as far back as 59. So this particular club, which I realize in the credits is actually the Royal Calcutta Golf Club, could not have been a British-only club as recently as 71.
No, actually, I think...
Just to finish this. And my other anachronism was that I find it hard to imagine that Hindustan Peters, the fictional company, had a British management as late as the early 70s. I mean, typically in the whole thing, among the requirements going quite far, Gandhi has written about this, was that you'd have Hindustan Lever India Limited or Lever Brothers India Limited making what they call Swadeshi soap. So the indigenization of these big British companies had already taken place by then. So the question I have for you is this, that the overt revolutionary act in some ways still remains an anti-imperialism or anti-colonial kind of argument, which is probably pretty passé by this time politically. And this particular guy, this protagonist, is what at that time would be, using the political language of that time, would be described as a comprador. The comprador bourgeoisie, the kind of bourgeoisie that grows up on the back of the British masters. I mean, so can you say a little bit about that kind of Englishness, not least concerning Ray himself, the kind of elite circles we're talking about, this kind of overt presence of actual British legacy in Calcutta at the time?
Yeah, actually there were, and in some way, I think also some of them are Eurasians. Not everybody is only British. So, but as far as records are concerned, even in schools for that matter, in ours, when I joined nursery, and at that time we did have one of the sisters who was from Belgium. And then after she died in the 80s, there was a sister who was from Kerala. So that the 70s was a moment when people were either moving out or they were dying out, like cancer mentioned here. But there still was some kind of a presence even in schools, in hotels, and in this. So I think it's a moment of phase out, because also if we consider, let's say, Mahanagar, that is mid-60s, but still this man who also plays a colleague here, actually. So he has his own company, and it is pitted against the kind of British, like as opposed to the white man, or where Arati goes, again her name is Arati, goes around knitting, and here Shamanundu's wife says, I knit. So these connections are there, and it's a moment of phasing out, I would say. But it is, I do not think that in 47 everybody packed their bags and left.
No, the companies went Indian. The actual Indian management, no, they became India Limited.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was
but
the point.
I think there is a question because these are all private limited companies, and so I think shares and management did have that kind of because here out of the board of directors there are 3 who are white, others are Indians.
Indian,
So we can see that kind of then one is dropped and then the 2 left. So it's that moment. So it especially with the private companies with the shares that possibly the both white and Eurasians or what was known as Anglo-Indians, it is every possibility that these presents were there, and it is. But I do have these kinds of childhood memory because a few because one is because our house was close to College Street and Presidency College. My earliest memory, and I was actually so small that we had these French windows that the old Calcutta houses have, and I could not actually see from that kind because from the point where the window opened, I was smaller, so I would stand on a stool and see. So, but I still have a vivid memory of earliest memory is of bombing. That a bomb was being hurled from one footpath to the other, and a rickshaw puller lost his leg. So that rickshaw puller dangling in the air scared me as a kid. But the other is that we were staying in the Park Circus, Park Street area, in a government quarter, and by then, by the way, Miss Shefali had shifted. She had retired, and she used to live in Park Circus area. So, but that aside, I did see until the 80s that this phasing out, and in schools, in private companies, there were actually a lot of white, not in the government or the quasi kind of government companies, but it did it's a moment of phasing out that we see in, because it is also there in Pratidwandi, that interview and or even in the interview the entire crisis of wearing a suit here that he's on a cycle and he's wearing a suit and he has to wear a suit. So that crisis is there, that phasing out. And
no, I mean, I'm not referring to the larger situation of the social mores and so on. I'm actually referring to the actual presence of the British companies and the thing about Indians not being allowed to be members of British of these clubs. But let's move on to what is probably the most, in my view, intriguing and bizarre and strange thing about this film, and that is Sharmila Tagore. I don't know, quite where to begin this. Friends from Bengal might, the near social sanction and indeed, in my view, even encouragement of an intimacy between him and his sister-in-law, almost with the complicity of the wife, is bizarre. Now this is a big history, in the sense that, I'm actually thinking back on, for example, Gaure Baire, Tagore's Gaure Baire, in which actually Bimala is literally being made available in the public domain to see what she will do. It's a peculiar situation of the modern woman being required to demonstrate her modernity by having these relationships with other men. In Gaure Baire, actually a political point is being made about Bimala and her capacity to become a kind of an iconic of the new figure of the new nation. Then, of course, you have Charulata. Now, Charulata, that entire nature of who she is, why she is there, and again her relationship with her brother-in-law. So say a little bit about this character, and what is this woman? Why would, my stupid question is, why would a major star like Sharmila Tagore even want to play this kind of a role, other than, of course, the fact that Satyajit Ray's wish was her command? apart from that, what was in it for her? What's the nature of this persona?
I think, and she also plays a similar part actually in Arunyuddin Ratri.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, and it is so typically Nobina figure
Nobina,
that it
yeah.
is even hard for me to explain, because it is such a sort of a like a understood situation. Many of the characters that even Aparna Sen played, or this figure. So she's educated, she's got a master's degree, she might become a professor, that's what being said, and then she is, especially the party sequence,
Yeah.
and that itself is something quite interesting as to how she is this social permissiveness about her, and I think Ray is purposefully using her
Yes, he is obviously
her own journey. She, this girl who was in Kolkata, then to moving to Bombay, then being married to Pataudi, that entire sort of trajectory, and very important. And like you were saying in the introduction, that she's done, especially an evening in Paris, let's say. So she is, and so it is an important figure in the sense that even like we were discussing, to take your family to this, and you can see, also in Chorungi you see that when Miss Shefali is dancing, that it is not a kind of a sleazy place where they've gone. It's socially permissible. So that itself is interesting, the kind of interrelationship, or what a Nobina is supposed to be, how she's supposed to walk or talk, or what her life means in the social fabric, and what is this presence, and as opposed to, let's say, if you were to consider her sister as Prachina.
Yeah. By the way, just for those who may not have got the reference, this Prachina and Nobina, which means the old, the new woman and the traditional woman, are terms from Bankim.
Yeah,
Bankim, so Bankim Chandra
but
Chattopadhyay had actually come up with this idea of the new woman.
But also clearly explained in Charulata, that entire scene where it says that Bhomor tumi Prachina na Nobina, she says Janina, which I find really interesting, that she refuses to be part of the entire debate around Prachina and Nobina. But also Bankim's essay had triggered many debate about who is Nobina and how, but more important, now that you bring it up, Nobina is different from the Babu. Both the elite Babu, which let's say Sir Boren represents, but also the educated Bengali middle class, the Bhadralok, So, so it depends on whether it's a prefix or suffix. So if it is Babu Bankim Chandra, then it's a elite Babu. And if it is like Ashish Babu, then you are just acquired your Babuness. But the Nobina does not, though there is a debate, she does not have these flaws. She is not a Mem Sahib. She is not into the frivolous thing. She is the educated woman in control of her destiny, which many films keep repeating again and again, where she makes this decision about the watch, let's say, or that in some way that it cannot be, that she cannot become what Shamalundu is. She cannot become, in that sense, that kind of a climbing up the stairs. It's not her journey. So it is quite also the permissiveness of the relationship is something more complicated, I think, culturally. So this is, of course, not Bodhi, but Sali. So that itself has a permissiveness in the larger context as well. But even Sali, Devar, Bhabi, and that kind of complexity is also she being young, very young earlier, and they meeting after many years, and now she is an adult, and therefore part of a kind of a possible sexual exchange. So that is itself is a kind of a complex thing, but it is repeated especially in Rabindranath. You know, there are number of stories, but there are also in the writings of the authors of the period and later, even in the 80s, one would actually find that these kind of interrelationships, especially of the woman who is Nobina, you know, and the kind of risks that she has to be a Nobina. That's in Ghore Baide also, right? That's the kind of crisis. So
it makes another kind of sense now when the corrupt deal is being revealed, and you're seeing it on Sharmila Tagore's face, and behind her is this Hawaiian dance going on. You know, there's a whole sort of something very significant.
And that's very like that scene kind of reminds me also of like a Kati Patang sequence. You know. Mera naam hai Shabnam, tumhara naam kya? There's this sort of a cabaret going on and some tension building up. It's quite a melodramatic moment.
Yeah, it is. So I've got many more questions, but let's have first round of responses, comments from anybody. Sorry, Shrikant.
Hi, I just wanted your opinion on the character of Sharmila Tagore, because Tagore plays in Ray's film, I mean, consistently, Nayok, Aranya Din Ratri, this kind of woman who can see through the deceptions of the man. I mean, she always has the upper hand. Even here, she's playing this kind of lost idealism of Shamlendu made flesh, and he's obviously kind of, he's fearing her judgment, but he also wants to be judged, but because in that way, he can kind of find his values that he has lost or something. But at this moment where this deal happens, there is this transference of guilt, and she's taking over his guilt, and she's crying, and I don't know, it really felt like a break in the Sharmila Tagore text in Ray's films. Like, is that like, do you see that as a false characterization? Why would she, what is her disappointment at his corruption? I mean, it's evident from the beginning of the film, right? What changes do you see that she kind of, this disillusionment with Shamlendu, I don't see it. I am not able to reconcile with the character that she has played throughout the film.
Yeah, because after the party sequence, she says something which I find quite significant within the schema of actually also Nayok, that she says that there's a bit of partner left in you, and what does that mean? What does it, so the mother says that there are these memories of partner. And in a way, Patna then, but Bihar, Assam, Orissa, these were, the strongholds of Bengali Bhadralok controlling the entire sort of, especially, the colleges and the entire system. So the Bengali bourgeoisie being very present. So, and the large houses and the kind of control, but also both the fathers are teachers, and so it's Shamalendu seemed to still represent, like she says that you do not have the mustache, you have a new glasses, but you're the same person, and he seems to be disappointed. So I suppose and then there's another sequence when she comes to office when it is still not revealed, and then when Shyamalundu, she actually says that I was to be jealous of my sister. Now, what is she jealous of? Definitely not the large house or anything. It is about what he represents and the journey he has made. So I think in many cases, and all of us who are familiar with these films, this question of making this journey, be it Opu, only that, of course, rarely women make that journey, but for these male characters, and Uttam Kumar has played it so many times, making this journey. So I think Shyamalundu comes there, and then suddenly it is really interesting about this film that it is, and it's also different from Jono Oronno, because here is a man who seems really have made it without suffering, as it were. And then this kind of a big reveal with Miss Shefali in the background, there is a purpose also in the entire thing coming together in the party sequence where you hear the bombing, which actually they say that you don't hear, and possibly you do not hear from that high rise. So that sort of imagination of bringing in the bombing, bringing in Miss Shefali, revealing it, and really detailing of the kind of social life that she is, like what he describes as geography. So the geography of the let's say of the upwardly mobile middle class and their aspiration, that space, that geography. And so I think in that sense, her really some of the expressions, especially that she wells up, that is I would say is also that kind of disappointment, because possibly the scenes that you see, that especially where she says that I used to be jealous, is some kind of a maybe even here, because there's two dialogues where she says that you didn't notice me earlier, you wouldn't remember me. So then the other scene where she says, yes, tell me, professor. So it is quite interesting in her imagination that what she is, but I find it interesting that in all these characters that she's not simply there for being, some kind of a moral guard. She herself is a character who has to make a different journey, which itself is interesting for many things, or even in Kanchenjunga for that matter. Yeah. So
I have to say that, you've thrown some light on this. I think that this is worth taking forward, because I really do feel baffled. I'm absolutely baffled by this character and why she becomes a moral pivot. First of all, continuing this thing about, a sort of a subterranean set of signifiers that are there in the film at all times, whether it's the fan or whether it's, the trade union or something. There is, I think, a secret relationship between this man and his sister-in-law. For example, it baffles me as to why he is so upset that he is not told that she has a boyfriend. Now, how is it any of his business? Would be a simple question I would want to...
Later, in the office, again he brings it up, and then she says, there's nothing serious.
Oh, right. Now, the other thing that happened, which I think is very, very pivotal, is that he thinks that his act of moral corruption is something she will understand and the wife won't understand. So there's a distinction then. So in a sense, he thinks that she would get the point of why he's doing this, and that leads to another. So in a sense, she is an insider to that kind of thinking, supposedly. And I want to further suggest that, when she says, for example, they're sitting in this race course, and she says, what if a bomb was to go off? As something. And this guy actually looks at her like that, almost as to say, not a bad idea, this might well be. So, in a sense, there is almost a covert connection made between the nature of ambition that this man has and the ambitions of, shall I say, the radical extreme, which fascinates her as well. So, the disappointment then is on a moral plane, which is not... It's not able to sustain this secret relationship. It's the moral plane is she's disappointed by his corruption. Okay, fine. That's an old-fashioned kind of moral judgment. But she's beyond that. One would think. So I do remain baffled by that problem in a sense. So
yeah, this is my disappointment. The thing is,
but go ahead. Okay.
It was very hard for me to see Sharmila Tagore as a vulnerable character, especially given the history in race films and this film in particular. So that kind of change in characterization felt really odd for me.
Okay. More, here? Okay, you had asked.
So we also saw a scene where I think she has received 10 letters from an absent boyfriend.
10-page letter.
10-page letter. So I think that was also the time of the the extremist movement in Kolkata, and there were a lot of people who had gone to the countryside and getting trained in arms, right? So why I found my inference was that the boyfriend who was absent could actually be a revolutionary, and there is also a scene where she gets asked, is he an intellectual, is he a revolutionary, and she says, yeah, maybe. So maybe that is also a reason why she was at the end completely frustrated at the moral corruption of Shamlendu. And to answer the question about which he had posed, that why she was so shocked about the entire incident. Yeah, I felt that there was a background which was just subtle, and ma'am, as you were mentioning about the specter of revolution being around while it exactly being shown on the screen. So I felt that there was a under the table, there was somebody who was an extremist, but he was not shown at all.
Okay, here.
It's also because she joked about that you do something wrong in the factory. I think that guilt is not Shamalendu's corruption. She knows that he is a person who has been corrupted by his ambition and his almost greed and everything. It is her frivolousness, her like, oh, I'm just flirting, I'm just playing around and kind of thing. Like, oh, just make some problem in the factory, then that's it. So where she was just thinking out loud and it actually happened, she understood that I feel so that she felt like somewhere she is at the fault too, to making this and having this problem. So I do feel that. And I also would like to add, till the 70s, mid-70s, a lot of private companies in Britain were there, especially in the tea companies. All those tea lands were still under a lot of British companies. It was not handed over to Indians. The jute mills were also same thing. That's why it suffered a lot, especially during the Naxal movement. So a lot of factories, a lot of companies were still having.
Especially with the private sector. Yeah.
Especially with the private sector. It was
Meaning
not...
with majority shareholding?
Yeah, majority shareholding.
Especially in tea. Yeah.
Especially in tea and jute mills, and I know some people personally. They have pictures of their grandparents like being handing over like the British people or something, like I've seen. So it was a very slow movement. It was not very like 1947 happened and they left. No.
That is we're talking about, and actually it's worth researching. But this Hindustan Peters, in my view, would be a reference to Hindustan Lever.
Yeah, Hindustan Lever, it can be Philips too. So many companies are there.
Right. No, but the
Indian
Limited, Indian Limited.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, we should look this up. So thank you for that. More, yeah, right here in front.
But about the spectral presence, I just wanted to add even the labor. You know, those are these sort of iconic shots like workers leaving the Lumiere factory kind of shots, you know, and we do not actually even see the labor worker, excepting we see in the beginning the fan and the mention. The film opens with that there is a problem of unemployment. In my office, there are 1,200 people working. We make these. But so it's quite interesting that the entire labor problem then is a problem of Shamalundu and Tutul. You know, because we accepting this person who has a name, which is interesting. And because in this film, everybody has a name, you know, which is really interesting. And then the thing that the problem, or I mean, as in the plot subject, the labor question, it is also it's there in the background. Like we do not really see workers, even as we would see in popular films, you know, like worker struggling, labor, or mehnat, and all those kinds of rhetoric. So that itself is a kind of a larger, like a class problem, more than, you know, either of the of an individual problem that we see here.
As Sir had commented that, you know, Sharmila Tagore's role in this movie is it stands at a very bizarre position. I don't know if I interpreted it wrong, but the way I viewed it was that she was his companion in a sort of, not in sexual context or anything, but more as someone who would understand his point of view. He wouldn't explain the things going on in his factory to his wife, but he would tell that to her. Because maybe he thought he saw her as a companion who would understand and who was in fact inquisitive about these things. Yes. And had a sort of intellectual relationship with her. And maybe there was, throughout the film, he wanted that sort of admiration from Sharmila Tagore, not as, you know, some in sort of relation, but as a companion, as a friend who would understand her. I think that is how I interpreted the relationship.
I don't know, but as I listened to you, I was also thinking that maybe for Shamalundu, she is a bit of partner, a kind of a, a kind of a memory past, a reference, also the revolutionary reference of Bihar at that point, which he has in a, like his parents, is put it away, you know, and that they have not gone back to Patna, and it's almost like 5 or 7 years before that they had visited, and she is some kind of reference, because I in that race course scene there is a shot of she grabbing his coat, right, his jacket, but he does not even react. There's no shot of he reacting to it. He is sort of looking elsewhere, which I find interesting, because instinct, you know, having watched popular film, is that once she's grabbing, that he would at least look, you know, but he does not. So there is something, and sometimes also in some of the way he speaks, that he treats her as a child. There is also that kind of a very complex relationship. It is, but I would read the sexual undertones. There is no, there are several scenes, but it is, but the sexual undertone does not mean that necessarily they would go into a relationship or whatever. So it is, I think, really, and one has to go back to Rabindranath to understand the nature of these kinds of relationship. In several of the stories, Ghare Baire, Noshto Neer, and others as well.
I mean, among the other, has anyone got any question? Go ahead. Yeah.
Just wanted to carry forward the thread of unusualness about this film. So, could you, either of you, just throw some light on insights about the editing? Because I felt like it was so snappy, so unusual of Ray himself, as well as most art house films of that time. You just mentioned about the race course sequence, where that reaction shot was just not there. The other thing that came to my mind was the morning sequence when they wake up, they are having the conversation at the coffee table, and there are some points where it just goes short, reverse shot,
Yeah.
without any
Yeah.
moment of breathing into the dialogues
Yeah.
at all. And of course, towards the end, it is exactly like that advertisement that they had made,
Hmm.
that abrupt ending, you know.
Mhm. Maybe I'd completely forgotten that color sequence.
Yeah, because I
had-
don't think I have seen the color
I
version.
also don't. I mean, I know that there was, but I'd completely blanked out on
Because
it.
of-
This is the restoration. This is the remastering.
Yeah, and
Right.
I wanted to
I mean-
mention that because I had not seen the color version, but even in the last few days when I was watching, the censor certificate says it's partly color. So we were wondering where is the color, where is the color, and it's now we know because even in television, of course. But I think it circulates as black and white.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
And on the YouTube version, this ad is completely missing.
It's completely
It's just
missing.
not there. But always remember that Satyajit Ray, famously, who was in advertising before he went into films, working for a company called DJ Keema. I don't think he made ad films there, though. He used to be a graphic artist at that time.
Exactly.
But
Borun Chandra himself was. Borun Chandra also comes from that advertising because in Pratidwandi, Borun Chandra, there's an acknowledgement, possibly because of The Office. So Borun Chandra does belong to, and he's never really acted in other films excepting, one of this.
Right.
So, because, and you can see, this is Borun Chandra like playing this part with Sharmila Tagore, and at least, he is quite suave. He is not like overwhelmed by the presence of the star. So, which itself is an interesting thing that he brings, but that is very rare also, no? That he will try to make a 1930s film. He will try to make, in Chiriyakhana or in Opur Samsar. And now he tries to make a bad advertising film and so on. And but also by then, I think with Shomindu Rai, there's a visual shift even in what the kind of spaces they build or the shots that they taken.
I just want to say a little bit about the editing. For me, I think what was completely, was the constant zooming into. And I remember actually, I've saw this film the other day after almost 20 years. And the only shot I actually remember from earlier on is that when he's talking to that trade union boss or whoever, the personnel manager, the camera zooming in on the wire of the, it's like as though the telephone wire is carrying all of this secret conversation through and so on. There was another sequence when that boy comes with the sweets and then he talks about the problem with the fish. After they leave, the camera holds for quite a while in that living room. The lights are off, and then you get the. It's actually straight from horror. That whole sequence.
Excepting that I wondered what is this shot, but actually it's so low that. You hear bombing. So initially when I saw it on YouTube, before arriving here, so I didn't hear that sound. So I was wondering, but he does a lot of montage kind of shots, of handshakes, of sunglasses, and I'm wondering, but. but from Protidwandi onwards, you can see that he is trying to shift, and this is different from how we would imagine Pather Pachali. You know, it's a very conscious, or the use of negative. There's a whole lot of it, but. And it's quite interesting how, in some ways, possibly the choice of Shankar and also the kind of story that he has to tell, it is in some ways quite mainstream also, you know, because there are many of the mainstream stories who are also adapting from the literature. These crises are there, the sort of class losing its character.
Right, right.
Yeah, I also had something to add. So actually, I also felt that there were a lot of shots. You also mentioned before the movie started that there will be a lot of shots of fans, telephones, and especially like rooms and handshakes. So I felt like he was trying to create like there was a fifth character in the movie which was like these material things. You know, like I felt as if the phone was watching as he walked towards it, picked up.
Also the lift, for that matter.
Yeah,
the lift is a major thing.
It's as if like they are also like part of the movie and observing everything. And I don't know if it kind of showed the era that the person has transformed coming from Patna to Calcutta, and the era that kind of signifies, I don't know, capitalism. So like sort of being controlled or around these new type of I don't know, it looked like it was kind of signifying something more, because that shot where they lingered on the room, it felt like the room itself is some kind of a
and there's so much on the apartment, and there's so many films actually about where this come up. Podatik, Interview, that apartment is a major thing, and all the gadgets, that entire tour and the lift and the telephone. And in fact, I was making an entire list of things that actually are emphasized again and again. But I was also thinking, you know, about the limitations of things and the new consumer culture, that Aronir Dinratri scene where the sister-in-law, where she is with this character played by Shubhendu, and she says that in that night sequence, when she sort of tries to seduce him in the Santali jewelry, before that she says, do you want Nescafe? And we've got Nescafe. So it is seen as Coca-Cola, Nescafe, and the various telephone, and these are not available generally for and this is itself is a quite interesting new cultures that become available, but what is really interesting, the time he spends on this, you know, the screen time that is spent on describing them.
Yeah, and just one more point that people have been discussing about Sharmila Tagore's journey or what was her role in the movie. I also don't think she was just a moral compass. That would be really boring.
Sorry, you just said?
I don't think she was just a moral mirror. I don't think she was just a mirror for him to see what he's doing.
No.
I also think that the way she reacted was also because, like, if you think about it, she's like just finished her master's, she's young, and she has been just hearing about these things. But when she actually realizes he has done that, I think that is the point where she loses her innocence, where she realizes that someone has actually done something, and they have, you know, someone she thought was some ideal person, and they have actually committed an act which you think about that, okay, there are other people, they are doing the bombing. But this person, she personally knows has actually done something. So I think that is probably what the tears were about. That is what I feel.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I have things to say about, one of the problems that arises with this particular category of the political figure in the 70s, and this happened in Uttarayanam when we saw it a few weeks ago, is that the lead character's political incapacity is often seen then as a way by which anybody who has any purpose in life is someone who's beaten on the head with them, you know. So anybody who's like political, like for example, you're familiar with the trade union bosses, for example, or whatever. It's all seen as a moral limitation or a moral crisis from this somewhat elevated condition of political indifference or something like that. I think personally that there is a world in which what this guy did is not seen as corruption. It is seen as one of the things that happens, may even be justifiable if you frame it right. You know, I mean, you know, there was this fan that goes to Iraq and, you know, whatever the other sort of legal structures and so on. Now, the point I'm making is that using the moral view of corruption as the, if you like, you know, almost like a stick with which to beat a character who's supposed to then be expressing some kind of whatever regret for this particular action doesn't fit into this kind of politics. And my own take would be that Shyamalendhu's assumption was that what he did was potentially justifiable and somebody like her would understand it. That was what I wanted to suggest. And I think that she then doesn't understand it and she judges him along a fairly orthodox moral principle in the end of the film. So that was where I got a little confused.
No, I think, you know, if you remember the first car conversation where she says that, do you know any of them? And he says, are you here to meet revolutionaries? So he says that, no, do you know those who
kill them?
And he ends up, because for me, when you're watching, there's something that Tutul does not see, but that is the moment when actually the character is shown as that it has shifted from what actually may not be even a crime, but trying to save the face of the company, is when he laughs that the laborer and he also is named, you know, Tiwari. So this Bihari laborer in the Bengal factory is likely would have lost, and then he says that the labor officer or the personal officer, he says that, and then he had diabetes, and then so we would have sent a garland, and then the point where he laughs is like, you know, is mirrors that she is in tears. That's how I think, because that is one moment that Tutul does not experience, but that is for us to understand. That is really the moment when until that point. Actually, I would also say that really it's a situation. He is a victim of situation or something typical like that. But that secret laughter is something that I find, because then Tutul ends up meeting the people who he might be knowing the people who kill. So that is actually, and he does not actually know the revolutionaries. And we even do not get to know the revolutionaries, except there is a letter 10-page which is, you know, and that's quite a shot in quite an intimate way because of a sari, how it goes, and then she's reading it, and then we don't know what that 10 pages contain. That itself is quite an interesting thing.
Thank you. I was actually curious to see what the connection was with the phone not working. There was a lot of screen time spent on the phone not working.
Phone
there
not
was a
working,
reminder chit.
Lift not
out
working.
of order.
And I keep thinking, you know, how Partho Chatterjee describes that in a situation like ours, the development is supposed to actually not happen in the way it is imagined, as to how the entire industrial structure imagines. And it's precisely a condition of let's say, of however you want to put it, a post-colonial condition or a way of approaching modes of decolonization, however you want to put it. The lift doesn't work. There are 3 scenes with lift. Why? There are so many sequences with the phone. And then when she looks at the geyser, she says, is it going to burst? And so on. There is a AC which they don't, run, because they keep the windows open. So there is an entire set of technology around them which is there, but it is somehow not part of at least their consumption, as opposed to, let's say, the Rolls Royce of Sir Boris, where he constantly sleeps and he is, and the kind of life he might be leading. So it's very interesting, the time spent on actually these things, which are quite. It seems like the close shots of the phone so many times. Phone working, not working, and or that that zoom into that phone cable. I really why, or the father comes in and says that I took I went to the other floor. Is there a lift person? So which is really quite. Think of the screen time that they spend on these things.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
one more scene, particular scene where Ramalingam says, like, if you near the fire, you'll be feel very heat and will be like in middle balance, and you'll be very far, you can't feel the warmth. So there is a particular metaphorically saying that he's saying about the two characters, where about the protagonist and antagonist. So really, it's a kind of like how will be the deciding factor within the life idealism. So there's two characters. He decided between, and like he's saying about the. He's also said about the ambitious is not being ambitious is not also bad.
Okay. So.
Raise that Bengali elitism about, let's say, the Tamil and the person who comes from Delhi and different other, and this sort of educated middle class is something that is amazing. The kind of, the layering that is there of Shyamulindu is not present for, even for the, let's say, the personal officer, or who is to be labor officer, or his other colleague, who plays the boss in Mahanagar. So that character, I'm forgetting the name. But even these characters are layered, as opposed to Ramalingam, who appears and gives some gyan. It's quite. Given the time that is spent on lift and telephone and all, it's quite amazing what the other in this case represents.
Surprisingly, no reference to load shedding. Huh?
The load shedding comes in John Oron.
No, but in 70,
I think
there would have
so.
been a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think electricity was a major thing because we were researching on the fan, and it was a big deal, fan, because I found a paper actually which is which actually praised it, but I realized later what is the problem and why about this idea of fan. One is this direct current and alternate current and the AC/DC that the older houses would have, but among the various states, it is apparently, and Gujarat is one, but West Bengal is one, which has a very low cost of production and very high tariff for consumption of electricity. So it's seen as a real profit model. So it means that running the fan for an ordinary household is expensive. So which is quite interesting that this fan, that the opening sequence, that why is the fan running? Sir, it's like a fan company, and he's put it on, and then he's saying that you will get a bashing because you've kept the fan on. So which is itself is quite about this, what is actually on the margins.
Okay, I think unless there's any last burning thoughts, I think we've had a really interesting session. We've done a bit by Indian cinema. With Satyajit Ray finally gracing the occasion. And I want to once again thank MAP, thank the Bangalore Film Forum, and above all, thank Madhuja
I
for
really need to
coming all the way from Calcutta, for being with us today, and so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and I really need to thank MAP and Bangalore Film Forum and Ashish, and actually so many friends present here, because it is like Shyamalundu's journey, who goes to Delhi in train but returns in flight. So it's those journeys that you make. So thank you so much.